Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all well and welcome to the Future of Payments Virtual Roundtable with Visa. My name is Alex Rolfe, and I'm the Managing Director of Payments, Cards and Mobile, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. From myself and the panelists, I hope you're doing well and enjoying the sunshine as we move into the summer. So a few housekeeping points that we need to take care of just before we start. The first one this is a recorded webinar and the recording has started now. The second one, this is obviously a live event and we will have a live Q&A session at the end. So what we'd like you to do is to think about your questions as we're going along, and there should be a chat box on your screen somewhere that you can use to pose those questions. The one thing we would ask is that if it relates to a specific slide or topic, that you just note that slide number or topic so that when we're referencing back, we can quickly get to that slide so that we can answer that question. Finally, and importantly, all assets regarding this event, including a thought leadership white paper, which was extrapolated directly from the research we're talking about today, will be made available at the end of the show, meaning that you could share with your colleagues or review the information again at your leisure. Okay, so let's move on. As you'll all be aware, the UK market is large, it's mature, and it's innovative. According to a UK finance report on the UK payments market from 2022, there were over 40 billion payments made in the UK in 2021, which represents a return to the pre-pandemic levels. The UK finance report further observes that payments markets historically tend to evolve slowly and over time, a fact that I'm sure that we can all agree on, irrespective of which market you happen to be in. People are, as we know, creatures of habit, and this is no less true for the way that we pay for things than it is for other aspects of our day-to-day life. Once we've found a set of payment methods that we're comfortable using and that help us manage our finances easily, it can take a great deal for us to break that habit. However, driven by the ongoing theme of digitalization and accelerated, unfortunately, by the COVID pandemic, we're witnessing continued evolution in how consumers pay and indeed want to pay. New methods such as account to account, which we can see is going to be quite a big deal and is coming down the pipe quite quickly. Buy about now, pay later, which has very, very quickly become embedded in e-com and m-com and even at point of sale. Mobile wallets and crypto, they've all started to gain momentum. So with this in mind, Visa UK undertook a study to understand the consumer perspective of the future of payments. And that's why we're here today. So I want to now introduce you to the Visa speakers and panelists who are here with me today. And they will then provide you with a brief overview of Visa Consulting and Analytics, otherwise referred to as VCA, for the rest of the presentation. They'll be walking through the excellent findings of the Future of Payments research and sharing their views and recommendations. The research debrief will be around 20 minutes. Afterwards, we'll engage in a panel discussion and dig deeper into those findings of the research. And finally, we're going to have some time for Q&As. So it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Alicia and Ngomo. Alicia is Vice President of BCA, who will kick off with an overview of BCA and then present the research findings. Also here with me today is Mandy Lamb, and Mandy is the Visa Managing Director for UK and Ireland, who will be joining the panel session and sharing with us her knowledge and views of how Visa in the UK and Ireland is incorporating some of the findings from the research into its current strategy. So hello to Mandy and Alicia, and thanks for joining us today.
Morning, Alex. Morning, everyone on the line. Good to be here with you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Alex.
Thanks, Alicia. It's over to you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you, Alex, again for the very warm welcome, and welcome everyone to this session. I'll do a very quick introduction of myself. So Alicia Ngomo, I lead BCA, Visa Consulting and Analytics for the UK and Ireland. For those of you who do not know Visa Consulting and Analytics, we are a global team of around 1,000 payment consultants and scientists. We provide consulting services to the whole payment ecosystem. We tackle topics from strategy to optimization, digital, and also implementation. We have a managed services team that deals with implementation. Data is our secret sauce. We leverage VisaNet, transaction data. We're talking about 160 billion transactions globally. And we apply data science to that, generate insights for our client. But today, I'm here to present this wisdom piece of research. The future of payment. This is based in the UK market. As Alex mentioned before, the world of payments is evolving in nearly daily. So we wanted to have the consumer's perspective on a few questions. How do they pay today? Why do they choose to utilize certain payment methods? What can we learn about the future of payments from how they engage today with new payment methods? And what has the payment industry to learn about the future of it? The approach and methodology was a mix of a quant study and a qual research. The quant study involved more than 2,000 either consumers via an online questionnaire, and then supplemented that with a qual study that was focused with a number of consumers, where we actually honed into the attitudes and the view of the future. Before I go into the actual findings, I wanted to provide a couple of notes on the UK colonial land, because for those that are not familiar, the UK landscape is quite dynamic. We have, according to the research, only 5% of people don't have a bank account, 24% are multi-bank. And these are findings that are pretty much in line with the XCA's estimates of unbanked and multi-banked. Traditional banks dominate, so that's not strange to anyone. But the most important thing is consumers have a great variety of payment choices. They can pay with additional methods like card, or checks, or cash, but they can also use very new methods such as e-wallet or crypto. So what I wanted to understand with this study was, what are the dominant payment methods that consumers use? And we tried to do that through a series of scenarios. Okay? If you see in this slide, we have paying in store versus paying online, paying for your bills versus staying with spending and traveling. We found that debit and credit card are still the preferred overall paying method. And if you look at the two shades of darker green on the screen, that's debit and credit card. Debit card were used by 30 to 56% of the respondents on anything that was debit-based spending, both online and face-to-face. 45% of them used credit cards for anything that was an expensive purchase. And that was bank lines, furniture, things like that. Any recurrent payments, not surprisingly, was still done by debit. We're talking 49 to 61% of respondents if we dive debit for that. And one thing that was surprising was cash. 32% use cash still uploaded. It's just something interesting when you think about cross-border opportunity. One of the things that we found interesting was one of payments. Of course, they continue to be done by bank transfer, but we could already see a slight move toward digital payment apps, the peer-to-peer, like for example, Revenue or the like. Okay, so moving on, we looked at demographics as well. Whether demographics influence the choice of payments by consumers. And we found that reach and affluence were the key ones. So age was the strongest factor. We can see, for example, if you look at the e-wallet line on the graph, 85% of the consumers that use e-wallet tend to be in the younger side, so 18 to 24 years old, whereas the use by older generations are more around the 30-40%. So age has affluence as well. So credit products, for example, are used 20% higher by people that earn around 80 to 100K per year. So both of those factors are influencing. One surprising factor that we found was that BNPL was 10 years more by slightly older and more affluent users. And the other thing that we found interesting as well, that in-app purchases or subscription-based purchases, they tend to be a bit more newer ways of paying, were nearly double in percentage for the younger demographic.
Alicia, just may I ask a quick question there? I know that we're seeing similarities between genders when it comes to them choosing forms of payments. I think the example there on BNPL seems to be more adopted by females. Are there any sort of further insights around that you could bring up?
But then in general, what we found, and you can see in the graph, gender wasn't as significant a factor when it came to choosing a payment method. The significant ones were definitely age and affluence. However, when it came to new payment methods, there were a couple of things. BNPL, for example, that you were mentioning, females tend to use it twice as much as men. When it comes to crypto, for example, males tend to be a bit more for use of the crypto than females, but nothing too significant in reality.
Okay, thank you.
I still have a family issue for what I can hear. Let me just move forward and see if I can get in. So next, once we looked at how people pay, the next thing that we looked at is why is it that they choose a payment method? So why do they choose a debit card for everyday payment rather than crypto? Or why do they use cash on their holiday? What we found out was that people do not necessarily give a lot of thought to how they pay. If you see the graphs in the slide, the reasons why they use a payment method tend to be because it's quick and easy. So that's what 54% of the respondents told us, because it's quick and easy. The second reason tends to be security. But the most interesting part is the 44% underneath that didn't have a particular reason to use a payment method. And that means that realistically, they're not giving a thought to that. Another thing that we found, when looking at the reasons why consumers use a payment method, was that consumer perception had a massive role in the choice. Most consumers have a default payment method. They feel it is easier, faster, and more secure. But they feel that way because they're familiar with the payment method, not necessarily because it's an objective measure of how easy or secure it is. So to give an example of that, 78% of the users use debit cards across all use cases, but they couldn't tell us a reason why they did. What is the impact of this lack of choice? The impact is inertia. So basically, changing consumers from one payment method to the other is not easy. They see it as a necessary and very complicated. And I give you another example. In the caucus book, they told us that 12% of the people in the respondent said they didn't use it in the wallet because they thought it was very difficult to set up. Then you would able to believe that objectively, it's not that difficult to set up. But if you're used to use a physical part, apparently you find that the easier the faster and easier. So in a world where consumers aren't very much feeling inertia towards changing payment mechanism, what prompts that change? And in the focus group, we analyzed what is the fact would prompt the user to move to another payment. Two things came up. One was ease, and the other one was motivation. As ease, they meant how easy it is to set up and how easy it is to use afterwards. And in terms of the motivation, we identified 4 key factors. One of them was leadership awareness. So do I understand the method? Do I, for example, know that BNPL doesn't charge me interest? Or are my friends and family using it? That awareness of the payment method is important. Prior experience was important too. And a bad experience, for example, giving money using one day use crypto, was a deterrent. We might have retracked them method again. Macroeconomic factor. So, for example, now we are in the cost of living crisis, and that has prompted a lot of people to either credit or cash use. And the last one was non-necessity. There were quite a number of fun anecdotes there, but one of them was I went to the supermarket, lost my card, my physical card, and then suddenly I realized or remember that at some point I had put it on my e-wallet. So that was the day I started using my to realize what if it's really good. So one of the findings that we had, apart from the easy motivation, was that to prompt change in the payment method, the merchants have a very influence rate. We actually asked for the reasons why people change from one payment method to the other. And if you look at that, at the graph, out of the top 4 reasons had to do with the merchant. The merchant was offering that payment method. So we moved to the second part of the research. We knew how people paid and why they paid the way they pay today. But we wanted to understand what they thought about new payment methods. And we asked them over the last 3 years, which payment methods have you been using more? And they have, in general, been using more of the new payment methods across the patch, more DNPL, more e-wallet. The most significant were e-wallets and DNPL. So e-wallets were used by 67% of the respondents. DNPL as well, 70% of the respondents. That's good. Crypto was a bit lower, only 6%. And that had to do pretty much with the fact that the isn't that form of payment. We asked them about widespread use of this payment method. And sorry, Alex, you have a question for me?
I do, yeah. Sorry, again, I was going to wait for a right time to interrupt, but just looking specifically at the cryptocurrency chart there, why do you think that crypto is still a niche form of payment? I mean, is it a fear factor amongst consumers, or is it something else?
It is actually a good question, because we did hone on that within the office games. Basically, I mean, there was quite a level of negative perception in some of the respondents, and that had to do with the fact that they had personal experiences, or their close ones had personal experiences of losing money in crypto. And that, I think, coped with the cost of living crisis, where people get a bit less, more risky. Risk about versus this befitting method that had to do as well in terms of the adoption of crypto. And the last one is a number of the respondents told us that they felt the threshold of knowledge that was needed to operate in crypto and make it effectively was quite high. So there's all of those 3 reasons together that a bit of a deterrent to wider.
Super. Thanks very much.
But going back to adoption, what we basically asked the consumers what they thought about more adoption of the payment method, and they were hesitant in some of them. So, for example, as I was saying, crypto, 52% thought it's not such a good idea, and see to the results I just explained. BNPL, there was mixed feelings, because 42% thought it was really good that it became more widespread and everyone used it. 48% were against. E-wallets and account-to-account were generally more favorably seen by respondents. More than 60% of them thought that was a good idea. However, they also acknowledged that the knowledge of what, for example, how they do an account-to-account payment, the benefits are, was slightly limited. So to the point of awareness and knowledge, slightly use. So at this point, you did understood, again, how consumers pay, why they pay the way they pay, and also what they thought about widespread use of the payment method. And we use all of that to distill 6 key attributes that seem to be what consumers look for in successful payment methods today, but also in the future. And those are ease and convenience, so minimal effort to set up and use. That was very much coming through in his experience. Security, is the money protected? Am I safe and fraud? Control was another one. Consumers want to be able to manage their spending and to control them. Availability, we talked about this on the version. So I want to use the payment methods that it accepted everywhere. And that was a constant increasing. And knowledge as well. Say, do I understand the payment method? Do I understand the risks that I'm running on the benefits that I can get in? And last but not least, right first time. Consumer has a positive first experience, they're likely to continue to using that kind of method to go to it. So who is that consumer of the future? We did, as part of the research, identify 4 key personas. They are archetypes for payments. They're not exhausted. They're just personas we identified based on different ages, affluences, and comfort in their use of technology. We have the careful, who was a bit older, low to mid income, more conservative, and they mostly rely on trusted methods like debit or cash. The second group we call the curious, also mid income, a bit younger than the careful, open to new payment. They tend to be followers. So those who have friends and family are using a particular payment method, then why not try it? The cool is mid-income, mobile first, very comfortable with different payment methods. And lastly, the confident, who is the more affluent, tech-savvy, a bit more risk, a bit more of a risk taker, and generally the first adopter of new payment method. We use these personas in a way to understand the future. And we thought, well, in 5-10 years, what would happen to this? They will still exist. The 4 of them will still be there. But the careful would experience a bit of a reduction in spending power, and the peak of spending power becomes cool and confident. What that means is that they will shape the payment demand. And if we go back to the 6 attributes that we've been talking about, these cool and confident personas are more digital, will demand mobile first experiences, embedded payment, advanced security, multi-biometric. They will look for the payment methods to be accepted everywhere in online, offline. They will be looking for more complex or more sophisticated money management capabilities, flexibility to split, to pause, to change payment. And above all that, they will want all of that to work right first time. So that is the consumer that will shape the future of payment, and that we need to be careful. Of course, we cannot predict what exact payment methods will be most used in 10 years. But we believe that any payment method that is going strong in the next 10 years will be following those 6 attributes we're talking about. And we also think that things like the card credential will continue to underpin payment methods. It won't be a physical card, but it's probably going to be a token. Consumers will still be demanding digital, mobile first, control and flexibility, advanced security. But these things will become non-negotiable, table stakes. And that means the balance is that they need to be able to modernize the technology to serve these kinds of features, and to do that constantly on an agile, reduced time to market. Another point to make is the merchant checkout journey. We believe those will continue to influence the choice being networked by the consumer. So the balance of influencing the payment ecosystem is likely to move through the different actors in the next few years. Ultimately, it's all about laser focus on the consumer, and that's why we did this study. They will be driving what the expectations are and what they need to do with the industry. And once we know that, it's about investing and innovating constantly on the back of that understanding. That's ultimately key for all of the industry actually.
All right. So, Alicia, yes, thank you very much. That was, I think it's really interesting the level of insight that's come out of that single report, and bearing in mind that it's actually only on one market. I mean, I know I say it's only on one market. The UK market is, as we know, very vibrant, as we said at the beginning, and there's probably lots of that content that will, if it's not relevant now for other markets, but certainly will be in the future. So I think let's get into the second part of this roundtable. I'd like to draw in Mandy if she's here, and just ask her, pretty much pose that same question to Mandy. This is a UK-based research study, but do you think that there are similarities across other markets in Europe?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think most definitely we obviously see the UK as a pioneer market for payments and obviously digital payments. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, in the UK, we were the first to introduce contactless payments on public transport, as an example. Now we're leading the way on open banking, as many as you would know, around AIS and PIS payments. We've seen really great traction over the last period. Another example would be, and if you look at the UK finance data, I know you referenced that earlier, Alex, was debit card payments actually overtook cash back in the late 2010s. So those are just three examples of where the UK could be viewed as a pioneer. But when we look at similarities across Europe, and in speaking to some of my colleagues across the region, many markets are maturing at a very rapid pace in different areas in digital payments. The ecosystem, the consumers that Alicia spoke about, are becoming even more savvy in digital payments. I don't think we'd be surprised to see many markets across Europe, forward-thinking countries, really leapfrogging some of the innovation. And here I'll give you an example of, Swish, as in Sweden. I'm sure many of you heard about Swish. Is a great example. It's a prime example. And there are sort of national wallets that are being deployed in other countries, such as Tiki in the Netherlands. And then we're also seeing buy now, pay later emerging across Europe as a theme that's here to stay. So I think, there's similarities. I think the UK continues to lead the charge. But I think there are going to be very progressive markets coming forward and leapfrogging some of that innovation, particularly in the wallet space and, in digital innovation more broadly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mandy, for that. Alicia, let's come back to some of those points you were making there. I mean, the research introduced a number of ways to pay, which I guess a lot of the people on this call will be familiar with at the very least. But do you see card payments still going strong in the next, 5 years or so?
Yes, I mean, that's a very good question. As I saw, that's one of the predictions that we were talking about. If you saw the data on the way people pay today, there's an overwhelming prominence for the use of cards. We don't expect that to go much lower in the next 5-10 years. Might not be in a physical form. So it probably won't be carrying around a basket card. But virtual cards in token form, supporting other types of payment, is likely to be. If you think about how cards satisfy the touch base that we're talking about, especially on the security and the availability part of things, you can see them going strong.
Yeah, I can maybe just chime in there, Alex, with, Alicia mentions security, and I just one point really worth mentioning is tokenization. Tokenization is a massive focus for us, and just in sort of simple terms, it's a very powerful concept that we developed at Visa, which really sort of conceals and devalues all the sensitive information, particularly in digital payments, where we know the fraudsters are very sophisticated. And it also helps to enable mobile payments in a much simpler, faster, more secure way. And as we know, when we bring the Internet of Things into the equation with cars, fridges, all sorts of other devices, it's going to be really critical that we continue to protect that information as it moves across, sensitive information as it moves across various devices. So, we're working very closely with the industry, whether it's merchants, issuers, to really build that tokenization capability. And not only do they help protect the end consumer, but it actually helps the merchant, with reduced abandonment rates, loss of sales, which are happening now because of experiences that are perhaps clumsy or consumers feel insecure around them. And that authorization rate for the merchants can actually pop up to 5% higher. And there's proven statistics that token have 50% less fraud as well. And we see this in the research that Alicia described, that the new generations coming through, they're going to define the future of payments as mobile first. It is already mobile first for them, but it's just going to continue to get deeper and more seamless in experience. And so we think that tokenization is that underpinning technology that will allow consumers to be able to transact in a safe way. So we're doing our bit to really encourage that next 5-year horizon that you ask about, with token at the core of everything that we're doing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Mandy. I mean, I think one thing that came across quite clearly there is this sort of proliferation of various different types of way to pay. And I think we sort of discussed at the earlier part, the habitual nature of people, not just in payments, but people in general. So, when I look at all these great ways to pay, and we're all involved in the industry, so we know what most of them are. We're used to trying out these things and wanting to try them out. But how can we as the industry shift consumer perceptions, say, when it comes to payment choices? Can we force them? Or, I think your point about tokenization, Mandy, is interesting because it maybe draws people in. But, what about that perception when it comes to payment choices, Alicia?
Yes, it's interesting. And then when I was mentioning before, that in that and how you move. And again, what how that is around it and motivate is you need to be better the consumer, something that is easy to set up and to extremely easy to set up. But also you have to build on motivation. And the first element of it is knowledge and awareness. You don't know about the payment method, they understand the risk, the benefits. Again, do you market it? Do you have advocate that start using it with suit different family? Customer experience first time matters. It has to be. If otherwise you have a probably need security matters against it. So all around ecosystem security, make them more. And ultimately that all of that builds that blood perception. Motivation and needs, I can't say anything and how to.
Sure. So just shifting tack slightly here. I mean, it would be impossible for a conversation around payments to go ahead right now without mentioning AI. So let's bring that out into play as we speak. Do you think that I would say that there's two very distinct parties. There's those that think that AI is absolutely wonderful and amazing, and there's those that are less certain, shall we say? But do you think that that AI is going to play a major role in shifting consumer patterns when it comes to making payments? Or do you think it might be related to other technology that's coming down the line, apps, wallets, etc.?
It's actually, this couldn't be a debate without a question on AI. AI is everywhere these days, to totally understand that. Let's be clear that Visa is already using AI. Visa pioneered the use of AI to detect fraud real time. And we do that across 14 trillion transactions that are being analyzed to root out transactions that are not good. And that happens every day. This year, we use as well AI, we use machine learning in your algorithms to analyze our data and sort insights. So we are using it. Now, do I think AI has a bigger role to play in payments? I do. I think generative AI has put AI at the tip of the hand every time, just by asking a question. You can do anyone can use AI. That's going to change a lot. One of the things that might change is the customer purchasing journey, in the sense that if you're using a digital assistant that is powered by AI, the purchasing journey might become invisible. So the moment we decide what to do and give them a recommendation to making a payment. So that might change a lot our ability to what we are talking just before, influence the customer. How do you influence the customer and that kind of thing. So that is one of the things that we are thinking about. And spoiler, we have paper based coming out. But we are thinking of that. Another interesting point here to make is Gen Z is our first digital native generation, and they're very much in. But one of the things I would notice is that their face-to-face payment interactions are not much. They're not much reduced in comparison to other. And this is important because we are seeing a generation that is going to need us to create experiences that are what we call digital, that are very much online and face. So all of these things are what considering. I think AI is going to play a role into shaping. Good.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. Mandy, did you have something to add there?
No, I just wanted to come back to the point on token, and I see that the audience had asked a question on the sort of worldwide uptake of tokens, and there are varying degrees of uptake across Europe. So just at the latest count, Visa globally had issued around 6 billion tokens, which actually exceeds the number of cards on a global basis. So just incredible, and obviously aligns with the growth in digital payments that we're seeing on a global basis. In Europe alone, that's around just shy of 3 billion. So you can see that Europe is actually, doing really well in terms of on a global perspective. So if you do the maths on that, in Europe, it's probably 1 in every 4 card not present transactions are using token at the moment, but it's a massive focus for us to really get that whole experience of card not present or e-commerce smoother. And so massive push from our side to mobilize, the issuer community to be token ready, but also to mobilize the merchant side of the equation to ensure that tokens can be accepted and processed. So lots more work to come on that from us on the token side.
Just a quick note on that, Mandy. When you mentioned the issuers there, are they pro this? I mean, do they see the benefits and they're moving quickly towards that with you, or are you finding some pushback from it?
No, there's firstly the first challenge is to make sure there's clarity and understanding of exactly where it adds value in the payment experience for the consumers and the way that the issuers look at their consumer journeys and commercial journeys. I think really important. So great appetite from the issuer community, because I think they see the fraud is a major issue in the UK, certainly on faster payment rails. The card fraud is low, and this is another area we're adding a security layer. But when you see the merchant storyline around uplifting authorizations and therefore the positive impact that has on issuers and on consumers, I think the momentum is there in the industry. But the heavy lift still has to happen in certain markets.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, I mean, coming back to this research that you've done in the UK, it is consumer led, which I think is great. We see a lot of kind of industry on industry stuff. So seeing the kind of consumer reaction there, I've really enjoyed that. Do you think, it's probably a slightly leading question, but are you planning on doing more? And is there a specific area that you might deep dive into?
Yes, absolutely. We are going to do more. Whilst we're a B2B company working with, the payments market, we have to be obsessed about the end user and the consumer. So you'll absolutely see more coming from us. Part of our strategy is to shape the market and lead the market, and so thought leadership is really a key topic. So we've already published a few pieces over the last, I would say, year or so. One that comes to mind is the work that we did on the future of credit and lending. What is the future of everyday payments? Really topical, given, cost of living and where things are going. We did, and we will continue to do ongoing research on cost of living, as well as small, medium enterprises and their critical role in the economy. So those are key. And we also bring to market regular payment topics, and we track from an economic standpoint how things are going in terms of consumer confidence, and where sentiments are of the consumer. So it's really, really critical for us. And, we've got a great lens on the market, but also global perspectives to bring to the table. And I think, critical that we do keep sharing it with our clients and the whole payment value chain.
Yeah, I mean, consumer sentiment would be an interesting one to look at now. Alicia, anything to add on the kind of research side, topics that you might like to see that you look into further?
Yeah, Mandy was touching on one of those part of our work in the BCA. Our economics team is constantly looking at the consumers and what is going on in terms of payments and how is that evolving, especially how the cost of this and what are the patterns of different things. But we and this year they're constantly building up the leadership. And this year, for example, we have done this future of payment. trying to refresh every now and then regularly. But also we published a paper on BNPL, which is an area on metaverse, which is again an area of interest, and we have a few coming. Though one of them actually a bit dark on any one of these statement methods, so wallet and super app, and the paper that I just mentioned from AI. So it's a constant process of looking at explaining the now, but also looking into the future.
Thank you. I mean, it's quite a specific question relating to VCA now. I mean, how, when you look at all the information you have and you look at the client basis or base that you have, how do you kind of get into the deep water with the client? How do you help them navigate some of these issues that we see around guidance and stuff like that?
Yes, it's a good question, Alex. I mean, you do help clients, as I said, across the ecosystem, and you tend to be helping them navigate change in this art. We use initially a data-driven approach. So you look at the data and the trends and try and help them identify challenges and opportunities. Then we problem solve together and we leverage global insights, things we see elsewhere. These capabilities that we have the whole of it that's to one thing in order to try and solve our client issue. Ultimately, we can help them to strategy, position, design, the definitization issue. One of the things that we're finding actually is that the blocker to innovation tends to be the clients don't have enough to do it. So they're not finding quite a lot of traction. But ultimately, it's about understanding the client's needs, the situation, and the goals that they're after. Put that into the context of where the market is failing, and work with some of the solutions pretty much what they.
Thank you. So, Mandy, up at the beginning, we said that we were going to discuss how you, from a strategic point of view, took some of this research and then looked to implement it in market. Could you give us a flavor of, when you see some of these results coming through, and we note the kind of other reports and research pieces you've done, you're marrying consumer sentiment, you're marrying global economic interests versus what you're actually doing in market. Can you give us some kind of thoughts and background on how you're implementing some of these findings?
Sure. So we don't do research for the sake of research alone. It's to drive relevance in the capabilities that we can produce for the market. Examples of all of the things you're hearing coming out of this research, future of payments, helps to inform our product strategy as an example. So how to deploy certain capabilities, who should we be deploying them to? The digital agenda obviously is coming through very strongly. We have to invest more heavily in that, what we're calling a program of work called Win in Digital. And so we will tweak and refine the capabilities and the go-to-market based on what we hear from the research. Another example is risk. How do we take what we're hearing, consumers' desire for it to want to be safe, secure? How do we weave that into our risk strategy and the risk as a service that we can then offer to financial institutions, as an example? And then it also informs, to a large degree, what are the capabilities we don't have in our toolkit, and how can we leverage them through partnership or through acquisition? And, many of you will know that Visa acquired Tink as an open banking player well over a year ago. And that's an example of how we use the consumer sentiments to inform capability needs to then inform, the go-to-market that we require. So really, really critical. I see there were a couple of questions on faster payments coming through on the chat as well. And the consumer's sort of indifference to choosing the payment method. Faster payments will continue to be, have a key role to play in every economy, and the points of PIX and others were raised on the chat. And that's where we also tweak our strategy and align our strategy to say our capabilities can do more than just touch the card credential rails. It can also help the faster payment rails, as an example. So how can our risk services sort of extend into what we call our network?
Sorry, Mandy, we lost you there for a second. So I think if we just go back to the kind of to the research that we were looking at earlier on, we clearly observed differences across various different ways in which consumers like to use payments and their sort of slow movement. But when you look back at that research, do you observe differences between the types of payments that consumers from, say, traditional banks use and the kind of more free-thinking or free-flowing fintechs? Are there clear differences between the two?
Yes, there are. I mean, hopefully you can hear, because I think some of my sound is terrible today. But we looked at a range of consumers, and some of them were banking effectively with fintech. So the likes of Revolut, Starling, Monzo. And what we found is that those players tend to capture a younger generation, so younger than 35 in general, and also need income, so up to 60K. They tend to be debit first. That's another thing that came from the research. And also the thing that was the most relevant about them is how comfortable they are with new payment methods. So they're comfortable with things like e-wallets, account-to-account, crypto, more than ever. Again, we think they are more of the cool and confident personas we were talking about. So these new players tend to be capturing more of that future of payments linked generation. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Mandy, you touched there on the cost of living and how topical that issue is, and currently in the UK seemingly getting worse with what we're seeing around interest rates and mortgages, etc., etc. To what extent does this piece of research, I'm aware we haven't seen all of it, to what extent does this piece of research provide insight into that topic?
So, Alex, we've done, you're right, we've done a whole sort of thought leadership series on the cost of living. It was broken into 3 parts, and it's ongoing. We published the first part of it in February, earlier this year, and it really tried to focus on what is the consumer attitude and thinking, what is in their mind as it relates to cost of living. It definitely showed that consumer sentiments had demonstrating concern and worry, and 2 out of 3 respondents said that they were feeling less able to live within their means than in the past. The most recent wave of the cost of living research was released earlier in June last month, and it looked at how, therefore, financial behaviours were changing based on cost of living, and what is the consumer response to those concerns. It definitely showed in June that there's this prolonged, as you mentioned, ongoing challenge, and that 1 in 2 consumers are saying that they're lacking confidence in managing their finances. The third wave we're going to be doing in the summer, and it's going to really look at what are the consumers' expectations of support in the financial services industry and more broadly. And really important that we continue to use that around things like financial literacy, education, really sharing the tools that are available to consumers to be able to manage their finances and control, and also reduce fraud. Because I think there could be a tendency to revert back to cash as a natural behavior and, put savings buckets and envelopes aside. But there's so many more tools available to consumers to manage their finances and have visibility and control. So that's some of the work, but ongoing, really critical that we feel the pulse of the UK consumer in the process.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. I'm kind of with you. I think there's a real opportunity for as an industry to kind of step up and help, here in that management of costs. So, Alicia, I don't know if you had anything further on the cost of living.
It's actually very aligned to what Mandy said. As part of our research, we also did a little bit of probing into cost of living, and exactly the same things came. Our consumers are starting to change some of their habits. They were talking to us about looking for bargains, tracking their budget, looking for ways to control their spend more efficiently. And that pointed a lot to the use of cash, and as Mandy was saying, envelopes to manage better. So there was already starting to, we could already start to take some actions in the back of the cost of living. After that, as we said before, I mean, ultimately, macroeconomic situation is one of the motivational factors to change the way we respond.
Okay, so look, we're kind of getting close to the end, and we've got a few questions that I'd like to take from the audience, but I just want to go one further point from me. Again, we talked about BNPL coming down the line, but actually I feel like BNPL is pretty much embedded in a lot of people's lives. Some of the research I've seen recently demonstrates that it's sort of there and people using it all the time. And I think, in fact, what I saw from your slides there kind of backs that up. So perhaps you could just give us a little more on the consumer perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I mean, you're talking about BNPL is allowing that flexibility that we were talking about, and in many cases, interest rates. So definitely attractive. We saw already that the attractiveness of BNPL at reasonable respondents was higher than for personal loans, for example. The 17% of the respondents were using BNPL versus 12% loan. And it was catching up to other loans as well. So you're right, it's taking a hold on the consumer's behavior. Interesting piece that we found, as I said before, female use is more. It's used more regularly as income increases, which was completely counterintuitive for us, as part of the result. And I would say that we think that we learned that when we asked about the future, and we expected to grow, but the feelings were mixed, as I've heard before. Some people were worried about the overspending and about debt as a result of the NPL, and that was the negative part of it. Other people, but in the positive side, were about, well, with peace, I can access purchases that I couldn't have before, because now I can take them out, or budgeting. And people thought this was very good. So again, mixed feelings there. I don't see it going anywhere, but I think there's that caution on consumers now that the payment method is slightly more mature.
Sure. And Mandy, from a point of view of implementation of BNPL, what could you tell us about what Visa's doing there?
Yeah, so as Alicia said, buy now, pay later or installment payments are here to stay. I think the trick is to make sure it's done responsibly and doesn't further, I guess, indebt consumers in any way in an irresponsible fashion across any segment. And so we've developed our own installment capabilities that we would deploy with issuers and with merchants, and it really helps customers to be able to have that whole installment experience when they're checking out in sort of an e-com experience. And it takes away all the frills and the friction that might exist in sort of an installment purchase at the moment. And you can actually, on pre-approved, or not pre-approved, but on eligible or qualifying transactions, the consumer would have the option presented by the issuer of certain payment terms. And it's really helping them to manage the total payment over a period of time, as with any other installment capability. But I think it's really well embedded with the issuers, and we're doing a lot of work to mobilize it on the merchant side in the UK. And it can also, over time, move into the face-to-face and cross-border space as well, so when you're traveling abroad. So massive focus for us. Earlier I mentioned that whole win in digital category, or where token sits, where digital experiences sit, and installments would fit very much in that as well. So we're piloting a couple of things at the moment, and hopefully consumers can continue to use this capability in a very responsible fashion.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. I'm desperate to get a couple of these questions out, just to get some of those audience questions. So thanks everyone for sending those in as we've been going along. One question I'm reading out here: you talked about reasons why consumers don't use a particular payment method. Do you have any insight on why they do use a certain payment method? I guess that's related to the research, so perhaps Alicia.
Of course. I mean, we briefly touched on that before. The two key reasons are convenience and security. So the primary driver is it quick and easy for me to use? Is it quick and easy for me to set? Security and protection came second, and that one, the authentication process was very much top of mind, but also the potential for refund if you got in trouble. It was very high in consumers' mind. Things like fraud were very which is not strange considering the evolution of e-commerce and how all of those scans out there. So yeah, those were the primary reasons. As we said before, people don't search too much how they pay, so they tend to stick to this is
Okay. Mandy, perhaps the final question for you and the final word from you. E-wallets are clearly a key topic. Do you see this as an important trend? And could you tell us more about what you see?
Sure. Wallets are topical, particularly in Europe. I mentioned earlier, the Tiki in Netherlands and the Swedish example of Swish. I think a wallet there are various definitions of wallets. So, when you speak about wallets, people have different opinions of what it might be. I know there was a question right in the beginning about, do you define PayPal as a wallet? We've got different categorizations of a wallet depending on the source of funds, depending on the flow, the experience. So I don't think there's one set definition of what a wallet would look like. And across various markets, just using Europe as an example, each of the successful wallets have solved for different points in the economy and points in consumer needs or unmet needs within a particular market. When we look at the UK, we could say, what is the sort of unmet need that needs to be solved? Where could, wallets play a role? And there are actually players in the ecosystem that could be defined as wallets. I think there's been various levels of success with, bank-backed wallets in the UK and across other markets. The long and the short of it is the view certainly from my perspective or a Visa perspective is we need to be ensuring that we're offering more value to the end consumer or the merchant through the implementation of wallet or a more cost-effective means of moving money, P2P as an example. So I think that the concept of wallets are here to stay, but they need to be solving a need in a more seamless manner for consumers in order to truly scale in any particular market.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mandy. Okay, so I don't know if, Alicia, if you have any final words for us on the topic?
I totally agree with Mandy's view. I think defining what a wallet is important. There's several parts. But one thing that is clear, I think, from that research is that 85% of the young population is using e-wallets in some sort of form. And I think that leads again to the point of potentially physical cards will not be as well when we now have banks issuing digital cards. Pretty much we are in an e-wallet now, whatever the definition of e. And that's likely to change. Clearly, I mean, you think the card potentially underpin that, but there's a need to define what that is and to think what is the right solution again to the needs of consumers. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that concludes the roundtable today. Alicia, thanks very much for your presentation and your thoughts. Mandy, thanks very much for taking your time out today and giving us some insights as to how some of that research is being implemented at Visa. Thanks to the audience for staying with us and asking lots of bright questions. It's been a pleasure hosting you both today, and thanks to the rest of the wider Visa team who have supported this initiative. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thank you, everyone.